Poliomyelitis was an epidemic that shocked the United States. In the 1900s, North America was struck with the dreadful disease, poliomyelitis. The virus swept the nation, leaving the question, where is this disease coming from? Many people were greatly affected by the disease, causing them to experience paralysis. The main symptoms patients would endure consisted of muscle weakness, fatigue, and fever.
Richard Daggett states, I had 2 severe headaches a few days before I realized anything was wrong. He thought that many people had random headaches, so he didn't pay much attention to them. On Friday, July 17, 1952, I woke up with a very stiff and painful neck and back.
People who had the virus were isolated from society, with street signs stating, keep off the street, infantile paralysis. This caused many people to fear for the worst. Polio was very contagious at this time. The vaccine for the disease wasn't developed until 1952. For many years, several people were suffering from this grim and dire disease.
There are 3 types of polio. The first type is subclinical, which may consist of no symptoms. 95% of polio cases are subclinical. Non-paralytic is when the virus does not affect the central nervous system, but they will have mild symptoms. The final symptoms are paralytic, the rarest of the 3. This type causes partial paralysis or in some cases full. There are 3 types of paralytic: spinal polio, bulbar polio, and bulbospinal.
Polio was exchanged frequently between humans, especially to the more susceptible individuals. During the peak time of the disease, many children were more likely to catch the disease because of their weakened immune system. This time period was during World War II. This was one of America's major encounters with the disease, consisting of paralysis. Polio is a part of a poliovirus and spreads through the stool. If an infected individual would distribute their saliva on another person, they could be infected.
The first summer when I was home in Minnesota was that gosh awful polio epidemic they had there. We admitted 464 proven cases of polio just to the university hospital, which is unbelievable. And this was a very severe paralytic form. Maybe 2 or 3 hours after a lot of these kids would come in with a stiff neck or a fever, they'd be dead. It was unbelievable. It was just loads of people that came in, sometimes with only a fever, but usually a headache and a little stiffness in the neck, and just absolutely terrified. At the height of the epidemic, the people in Minneapolis were so frightened that there was nobody in the restaurants. There were practically no traffic. The stores were empty. It was just considered a feat of bravado almost to go out and mingle in public. A lot of people just took up and moved away, went to another city.
Even though there are no known cures, there are many treatment options. One of the main figures of polio treatment was Sister Kenny. Most people were doubtful of her medical skills since she had no past schooling in the medical field. She was born and raised in Australia on a farm. Sister comes from when she served in the Australian military as a nurse. The chief nurse is known as Sister. Her methods for treating polio consisted of using hot packs and making patients use slow and steady physical activity.
Every day prior to therapy, I would get hot packs. These were wool blankets that were steam heated and spun dry, then wrapped around my arms, legs, and torso, states Daggett.
Sister Kenny embarked to America and spoke to doctors about her approach to the disease. Many doctors were skeptical about her ideas and methods, so she sought out to a more attentive group of people in Minnesota. She then began working in clinics until she established her own, known as the Elizabeth Kenny Clinic.
When patients had trouble breathing on their own, they were put into the iron lung. The iron lung was mainly used by polio patients and was powered by a motor and 2 vacuum cleaners. The inventors Philip Drinker and Louis Agassiz had used the tank respirators designed to produce the iron lung. They needed a design where the machine would pull oxygen from their lungs. They hoped that in a few weeks the patients would be able to breathe on their own again after using the iron lung. Once patients' affected limbs were strong enough to function on their own, they had relearned to walk again. Polio survivors would have to use leg braces and crutches.
The scientist who discovered the vaccine to polio was Dr. Jonas Salk. Dr. Salk was born October 28, 1914. He was in a lower-income Bronx neighborhood. Jonas's parents cared very much about Jonas's studies. He went to college at Michigan University. While he was at school, he studied the vaccine for influenza. He later became the leader of the virus research lab at the University of Pittsburgh. Salk thought differently than most scientists. He explored many new ideas to come up with the formula for the polio vaccine.
Dr. Salk's first steps consisted of sorting the 125 strains in the virus. The strains fell into 3 basic types that defended the virus. Using formaldehyde, he killed the virus but kept it whole, so that it would trigger the body's reflexes. This was a major breakthrough which led to the exploration of the polio vaccine. After this, many trials began to see if the vaccine was effective. Dr. Salk aimed one of his main trials to children who had recovered from the disease. He saw that after the survivors had taken the vaccine,
their antibodies had expanded. Salk also did the same thing to his family and saw the same results. He reported his outcome to the Journal of the American Medical Association.
That was Dr. Jonas E. Salk, discoverer of the Salk vaccine for polio.
One of Salk's trials took a cold turn when there was a report of a young girl experiencing paralysis in her arm that had recently been vaccinated. They later found that there had been a defective batch which caused this amongst similar cases. They had later found paralysis in the area they had just received vaccination in.
After this, the trials were suspended for a short period of time while they were examining the situation. The final outcome from the investigation was around 10 dead and many paralyzed. Health officials made numerous adjustments to the manufacturing of the vaccine after the Cutter incident.
Why do I see things differently than the way other people see them? Why do I pursue the questions that I pursue, even if others regard them as they say, controversial, which merely means that they have a difference of opinion. They see things differently. So I'm interested both in nature and in the human side of nature and how the two can be brought together in an effective and useful way.
I have had dreams, and I have had nightmares, but I have conquered my nightmares because of my dreams. Dr. Jonas Salk.
Another big contributor to the polio vaccine was Albert Sabin. He was born October 26, 1906 in Białystok, Poland. He began his studies over polio after obtaining his degree. Sabin then joined the Rockefeller Institute in Albany, New York.
After this, Sabin then received a job at a research foundation. He discovered that the virus was able to live inside the stomach and intestines. Sabin then later found out he could treat polio orally. He mainly focused on the stomach area using another form of the virus that he later transmitted to the intestines. This then helped defeat the fatal polio virus in the intestines. Sabin and other researchers did tests out of the country, discovering that they had accomplished their goals in finding another way to eradicate polio around the world. Scientists, who is also a human being, cannot rest while the knowledge which might be used to reduce the suffering rests on the shelf.
In 1962, the cases of polio dropped down to around 900 cases in America. This was a big relief in the United States. Many people finally felt that they were able to be brought out of isolation and live without fear of being the next victim. The medicine field was ultimately strengthened from this exchange. Scientists and doctors knew now that you could take different strains of viruses and make another form to protect from the disease. After recovery, between 20 to 40% of polio survivors experience PPS. PPS stands for post-polio syndrome. The symptoms include muscle weakness, fatigue, muscle atrophy, and breathing problems. These symptoms are similar to those in the polio virus. After surviving the virus, the neuron cells are severely damaged, causing discomfort and strain on the joints and muscles.
The analogy I often use is that it is like plugging in 4 toasters to the same electric outlet. Eventually you will blow a fuse, says Daggett.
How to mainly treat the virus is to conserve energy and exercise that infected area. PPS is rarely fatal to survivors. People who have recovered from polio today showed courage and strength against the deadly polio epidemic.
Some good things came out of the virus, like our nation coming together. Although polio took away many young lives and drained childhoods from various people, in the long run polio showed the heroicness and will of many people. Braces and crutches do not define us, but show our strength. These are my braces. They set me free. But these are my braces. They are not me. Without my braces, I sit in my chair. Without my braces, life is not fair. But put on my braces and I'm just like the others. Put on my braces and I run like my brothers. Well, not exactly, I'll have to admit. No. Well, not exactly, because I had polio.